The word that we hear over and over is transformation. Well, what happens when the company that helps you transform transforms? Today, we're going to be talking about the state of the technology industry and what matters now, so stay tuned. Hey everybody, this is Chris Brandt here with Sandesh Patel. Welcome to another FUTR podcast. Insight Enterprises started as a mail order business selling hard drives in 1988, but today it's a multi-billion-dollar Fortune 500 global technology company. Insight is transforming itself to be a leading solutions integrator. But what does that even mean, and why does it matter to customers? In the interest of full transparency, I wanted to say that Sandesh and I both work for Insight. But that said, this is an important story. And as things are rapidly changing in this market, Insight is changing to meet these new demands. So today we have with us Stan Lequin, president of Insight Solutions. Stan is going to tell us all about what goes into being a solutions integrator, why it is important, and what Insight brings to today's market. Welcome, Stan.
Thanks so much, man. I really appreciate you guys having me on today. Excited to be here.
Yeah. I'm excited to have this conversation. Sandesh and I have been wanting to have this conversation for a long time because, we've been privy to some of the, transformation that's going on in Insight. And it's not an insignificant change that's happening here. But before we dig into all that, tell me a little bit about yourself. I know you've been at Insight for something like 20 years or something like that, right?
There's an acquisition in there that spans it. But, I started out in consulting, so working for what was the time, the Big Six. And so great place to get started, learn how to be a consultant through that motion. Worked for another couple consulting companies. And then in 2001, I got a chance to help build an organization. And so really we built two businesses. One was a managed services business. So remember back in the ASP day, right after .com, we got in the
ASP is a term we haven't used in a long time.
I'm bringing it back. Application service provider. We made the bold move of buying a data center at that time. And then we grew that in 2009 and we sold it. And we also built a consulting organization as well. And I always crack up. We met with Microsoft and we were a large Microsoft partner at the time. And they talked to us about their ideas of getting into the cloud and what their data centers were. And they, were using ocean water to cool them and felt like we had smokestacks on ours. And so we felt like it was time to get out of the managed services business. And so we did that in 2009. And then 2011, Insight acquired our organization. And that's how I came to Insight. And it's been just an incredible 11 years at Insight. And I've seen just tremendous transformation over that time.
That's definitely a good long run. And, Sandesh and I came through the DataLink acquisition back in the day. So, we also took a similar path. Before we get into, the whole solutions integrator piece, I want to ask you, I was watching recently a video where this voiceover artist said, hey, I'm going to take you through a day in the life of a voiceover artist. And basically it was a supercut of her saying transformation, transformation, right? So we hear a lot about this concept of transformation, but what does transformation really mean in the sense of, a technology organization transforming?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a used term. And it's a term that is maybe even moving towards a little bit overused. But I think what's great about it is it's kind of individual to the type of transformation organizations are going through, right? And so with our clients, that transformation is all about, how do I get better access to data? How do I monetize data in new ways? How do I transform my business to take market share, to enter new markets, to create disruption? And so transformation is all very independent and individual for those organizations based on their unique businesses. And for us, it's really about moving from a technology provider business, which we continue to do and will always do at very high levels of success, but really helping organizations not only in what their technology acquisition is, but really how do they leverage that technology today and the future. And really recently it's been around building platforms for innovation for organizations and how do they get to market faster with their solutions, how they create disruption through that, through the solutions they create, and then also helping with the innovation component of it. And so what we've really been doing through the acquisitions, organic growth, really focusing on fast growing areas in the market, really, building a partner ecosystem that hits all those areas that help organizations truly transform, create those
Right.
platforms for innovation, and then allow them to innovate at a speed that gives them a marketed competitiveness. I mean, that's really kind of what it's been.
Since 2020, things have changed a lot. There's been this just radical transformation of technology, right? And
Hmm.
I think, I have to think that that plays large in Insight's decision to, like become a solutions integrator. So could you tell us a little bit about like what the thinking is there, and more importantly, like what is a solutions integrator?
So I think we've seen just rapid growth in 20 through 2021, moving into mid 2022, and then we saw a pretty rapid macroeconomic shift, right? And so
Right.
for organizations, we have some organizations that right now are working through, how do they better leverage and optimize their current platforms and technology debt, and do so in a way that's going to allow them to, continue to compete. We have other organizations that are in very fast growing markets. And for them, it's around how do they, use this as an opportunity, what's happening in their business, to accelerate and really enable the ability to go faster through the types of innovations they want to drive. And so we have clients that are kind of in both these spaces. And I think it speaks really well to what it means to be a technology solution provider. And so I think of it as three lanes.
Mhm.
Historically, we've been amazing at technology providing. So, being that one source that can unlock all of our partners and helping clients really, acquire and purchase that technology and then do the implementations associated with it. And so there's other organizations that do that work. So I think of that as the left lane, right? In the middle lane, we talked about transformation. It's really that digital transformation space. Now that's where you're going to typically see a systems integrator enter, is within that space, right? It's a focus on what's new. It's a focus on, we're going to build a modern platform for you to help you drive the innovation side of it. And that's really what I see as the right side, is the innovation. And that's really where we start to get into the business outcomes that we're driving. We feel strongly that best experience wins. And so it's about creating those incredible experiences, whether it be for our clients' customers, whether it be in unlocking the power of data in their business, the experience they create for their specific knowledge workers, which is industry specific, or even product enhancement. So that sits within the innovation space. So we really have those three lanes. We have the technology lane, which is our history, the digital transformation lane, which is those platforms for innovation, and the actually innovation lane. And I think what's unique about us as a solutions integrator, and we call it a category one, when you think about partners that can go across all three of those lanes, the sort of competitive landscape completely melts away. And I got a great example. So we were working with a healthcare organization, and so they had purchased through us converged infrastructure to be used in software-defined networking. And so we helped them with the acquisition of the product. We implemented the product, did the architecture, and also implemented the software-defined networking solution as well. And so it was about 2 years ago. And this is a client we have 18 years of history with. We know how they've changed. We know what they've done from a technology provision aspect. So they recently had made a decision that they're going to move forward with BigQuery around data and analytics, and specifically around, with GCP with Google, specifically around BigQuery. And so as we engage with the client, understanding where they're going, where they've been, we came up with this idea around BigQuery Omni. And so that's BigQuery basically pushed out through containerization out at the edge. And so we looked at, you have this converged infrastructure. You have these thousands of CPUs. You have these terabytes of memory that's being used at a fractional amount for software-defined networking. Why don't we push BigQuery Omni out to the edge and create basically an AI mesh that then you could leverage those assets in a unique way. And so not only does that, in this specific instance, cut down on your cloud consumption fees and egress, et cetera, in and out of the cloud, but more importantly, it actually changes the use cases that they can solve. So if you think of healthcare in this case, right, time could mean lives. And so the opening up of new use cases by using technology that they provisioned and bought in the past was pretty impactful. And so when I think of what partners can help a company around their business outcomes they're trying to drive around healthcare and analytics, what companies can help around creating those platforms for innovation, but also do so in a way around understanding the technology that they bought in the past, in this case, on-premise converged infrastructure. Really not a lot of organizations that can do that. I really feel like we're the one that can. And so it's kind of a real world example of a solutions integrator. And it's really the ability to go across those three lanes: technology provider, digital transformation, and then actually driving the innovation component of it as well.
You just threw out a whole lot of interesting technology that, really didn't exist, say 5 years ago. I mean, when you start talking about containerization and things like that, and sort of the way that the technology comes together. And I think that, and Sandesh, can attest to this. I think what we see a lot, you mentioned technology debt. We see a lot of companies that had a tremendous amount of technology debt. And, in 2020, they were all kind of forced into saying, hey, we have to be a more agile organization. We have to be faster to market with things, right? And so that very much changed the game. But I think a lot of companies really struggled to understand how much technology had changed and how much technological debt they probably were carrying, right?
Yeah, and it's interesting too, Chris. I mean, such a good point. And what we saw in 2020 was a couple things, right? So there was a feeling of I knew I was behind, but as things rapidly changed within the world, I quickly realized how far I was behind. And so that created a bunch of work for us around data and AI. It didn't matter where you put it. It was the speed at which you could go to market around it. And so we do a survey every year of 500 leaders, executive leaders, and large organizations. And you look at how that survey's changed from 2000 till now, which is a relatively short period of time. It's insane how it was all about net new. Don't care where I put it. I'm going to put focus on where I'm going because I need to catch up, or I need to take share, or I need to better respond to rapidly changing sort of world things in that process. But when we did the survey last time, number 3 has moved up, is now technology debt. And so 86% of the respondents across 400 people said technology debt is one of the most important things that they actually have to focus on. So the ability to not only rationalize that debt, understand that debt, and figure out a plan on how to move forward with it is a critical component of it. But if there's new use cases that you can use, like in the example I gave, to leverage that infrastructure that exists in unique ways, then that's kind of a little bit of a two birds, one stone type of situation. So the technology debt component of it has moved up pretty rapidly, and one of the biggest concerns that are facing not only just IT leaders, but executive leaders in general.
That survey, is that something that's available to the public? Is there somewhere that people can find that?
Yeah, they can get it on our website, and then I'll work with you on the best way to link it as well.
We'll put a link, and I always say I'll put it somewhere right here on the screen or in the show notes. I think that'd be great for, people would probably be really interested in taking a look at that.
It's a great survey, and we'll make sure sort of the history's in there, because I think it's amazing to track the speed at which trends are changing now on a year by year basis.
You talk about the pace of innovation, and you started the podcast by talking about ASP, and we kind of laughed. It's like talking about Cobalt and all this kind of stuff, But if you think about it, like mainframe days, blah, 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 we've all been doing this enough where we've seen the pace of innovation, but it's really seemed to take off like quite a bit here in the last 3, 4, 5 years, right? It's like how quickly we're developing code, how quickly we are, creating solutions is really quite...
And the complexity of it too.
No doubt. So from your perspective and being a technologist, like what's the next wave of technology that gets you excited? That that you're happy to be in tech because this is the kind of stuff that you want to be doing?
I think it's across a couple areas, right? It's hard to not get excited around the use cases of AI. You see what Microsoft just announced around chat GBT, right? So that there's so much that's happening right now. When you look at concepts around citizen development, or we like to call it fusion development, right? Where you're giving someone who is an analyst who understands a business the tools of which they can start to build applications, gather data insights, get access to data. When you start to look at, what's happening around code generation and the simplification that's happening around it, I just think there's an accessibility that's going to happen. And we saw this, it was all around democratization of data and getting data out to people. But that was still a situation where you had to serve it up in some sort of fashion. When I think about what's happening right now from an AI perspective, and the data insights that people are going to be able to get themselves, and how that's going to have an impact on organizations and just society in general, it's exciting. And there's a lot of that goes along with it. I mean, there's tons of things that you can read on ethics of AI and bias, et cetera. And so there's quite a bit around it as well. But when I think of the good components to it and the problems going to allow us to solve, and the amount of data we're going to put in people's hands that are going to allow us to solve things that we couldn't even imagine of. I mean, for me, it's hard to not get really excited about that as a technologist.
Yeah, you and I are on the same page. Like that, that really gets me excited. And nervous for sure. A lot of people are worried about their jobs getting automated. AI is going to take over. Blah blah blah. I think that people are going to be even more important than ever now because of all those other things that you described. Right? It's like having an ethics board and controlling the bias and not letting your code go rogue and do some crazy, very highly impactful, dangerous type outcomes could come from it. So there's like the excitement with like this like nervousness.
There is, and I get a chance to present to a bunch of people and actually do a presentation on AI ethics, and I always start by saying the math doesn't exist yet for a Skynet type situation, right? But what you do run into is the ability of AI to create bias or to be used in threats, by bad actors and guess passwords and those types of things. I mean, there's those components that we're working through, and there's AI which defends against AI, and so it's definitely an interesting, rapidly changing world. But I mean, the ethics component of it is really important, but the business enablement side of it is equally important, and on the people side of it. Having people know their organizations, they know their businesses, they know their markets. And by getting more access to data and being able to free themselves up from, what is that manual work or waiting for someone to get them access to data and do it in a way that they can access it through any type of language, almost like we're speaking right now. I think the power of that is limitless, and it's going to create more opportunities, definitely not less.
I think we're definitely at a really interesting inflection point in technology right now. I think, when OpenAI released ChatGPT, it really changed the game. And now we're seeing everybody step in with what they had. And it's, I think we probably overestimate, what it's going to be able to do in the near term, drastically. But it's a really interesting place. And I think it's going to change the nature of work. Instead of having to write code, maybe it's, being the person who knows how to prompt it correctly to get to what you want. I think there's definitely a lot of things there, but it's a really murky field to navigate right now. And if you look at like Bing Chat that Microsoft released, it's gone a little squirrely. Which seems to happen every time you attach an AI to the internet, which is, who knew, right? It would go a little squirrely. But I think there's a lot of really interesting questions still to be answered here.
Yeah, without a doubt. It's, for me, there's been a couple points where I've looked at how technology have taken big leaps. And I looked at something and I said, I don't even know how this is possible. And one of them is pretty simple now in hindsight. But like, remember when wireless came out? The concept
yes.
of walking around with your laptop and getting 10 megs of access was insane. Like I just couldn't understand.
I remember it was insane to walk around with a phone.
Exactly right. You saw Gordon Gekko on the beach with that massive phone. And you're like, that dude in the movie Wall Street is a player. And I would say like this is one of those times where it's just. It's so different than sort of that example, right? But it fundamentally changed so much about sort of how we worked. And I think about what this is going to do, what we're going to see around citizen development. And I think it's going to really create some things that we'll look back in hindsight and go, God, man, that totally changed the way we work in such a good way. And the other component to it is there's still going to be a need for just incredibly talented developers. And so there's going to be those use cases and we do it through what we call Fusion. It's a combination of, we do low code, no code for components of, the application, and a lot of other components of the applications is decoding components of it. And so there's always going to be that world for the developers as well. And they're going to be more important than ever. But the ability to open up, access with these new tools, I think is going to create some incredible capabilities.
We've seen this happened before, right? Where things start off, they're very engineering driven, right? They're very focused on, like, you have to get deep in the code to be able to produce anything useful. I mean, think about HTML. I remember we were all, manually, writing out HTML and, editing the GIF files or GIF files. I don't want to get into, religious war here. But like, and now you would never think to do that. I mean, there's tools to do that. There's platforms to do that. And I think that a lot of this stuff is kind of going that way. Like, data has been a little hard to get at, for the average person, the person who actually most likely can make use of that data, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, using these AI tools and, like you say, low code, no code, really puts compelling tools in the hands of individuals who can make most use of this data, right?
It does, and it also creates just a great opportunity for organizations around that data, and so bringing that data in a way that is digestible, can be used by these tool sets is a big focus. There's not any project that I can think of that's around modern app or around platforms of innovation, transformation beyond cloud at the edge or in the data center that doesn't include components of data. And so the opportunity around data, unlocking the power of that data, building that data in a way that it's digestible and usable by these platforms is a huge opportunity. We're also seeing quite a bit too. We're engaging with organizations around, data models that fit within specific industries is a big component of it as well, right? So you're starting to see healthcare data models be created, financial services data models be created, and so there's such an opportunity as we're going through around data, not only around the security and protection of it, but also in getting it into a space where it becomes very usable to the masses through these tool sets. And so that's definitely created a continued revolution around the data component.
And the other factor for that too, Stan, is that not all customers have that figured out. And the transformational change is happening at such a massive level that everyone's still trying to figure out. So the people component now become even more important, right? Is like, that's why companies are going more and more out to folks like Insight for services, is because they don't have it in-house. The answer, it's not like they can just go and watch a YouTube video and figure these things out, right? Like this is complicated things. And as much as there's risk associated with a lot of this transformation, the reward, if you do it and if you can do it and execute, the reward puts you in a more competitive place than you would have ever thought as an organization.
And it's just core competency. So organizations, and this is what's great about low code, no code, and what we were just talking about, their core competency is in their business. Their core competency is in data estates and meshes and all the different ways that we leverage data today. And so that's, bringing someone who has that core competency, who can build that the right way, and even maybe manage it for you the right way, so you can unlock the power of that data to the end user, is a big part of why we engage with organizations as well.
The thing I think that's interesting too, there's been a big shift in that world too, because in the old days you had, companies had, their DBAs and things like that, and, people who could write, clever SQL statements and things like that. But what you're talking about is fundamentally something very different, right? You're talking about, like, adding machine learning to large data sets and artificial intelligence sort of tools that, are not in everybody's wheelhouse, and bringing, those fundamental data science kind of methodologies to analyzing a lot of this data to sort of extract more value out of this, right? This is not just like, running through a database and looking for things. The kinds of transformations you're talking about are really substantive.
This is happening at the C-suite.
Oh, without a doubt. And it's about, we talked a little bit about technology debt. It's about creating that abstraction layer of that data, wherever it sits in those databases, and then pulling it into, an abstracted layer that then you can get insights off of, is a big part of it. And then on the data science side of it, it's really around asking questions and then working through data models that solve that question for you, and then working through what's the best way, especially around models, what's the best way to train it, what's the best way to train it in the right way. You start to get into what's the access to data that you can get, data security. You start to get into concepts around data sets that are public data sets that use to train models versus private data sets. And so there's a huge component to it. The power that comes out of it is massive. And the work that goes into it to transform the data, make the data digestible. It's important work, and it's not your average DBA type of work. But when you get it to a state to where it's consumable, you get it to a state where it's consumable in a way that, security principles are built into it, because little databases that have, very strict access controls are different than when you start to get into data lakes and other types of data access types, right? But working through and transforming that data while it's in flight, tagging that data while it's in flight, getting that data into a place where it's usable, and doing so in a way where security is inherently built into it, so you can unlock the power of those applications, is a critical component to what we do as we're engaging around the data transformation projects we do with our clients.
And as Sandesh was pointing out earlier, that's not the core competency of a lot of these businesses. So, it's difficult for a company to invest in, building out those competencies within their organization, especially when the pace of change is happening so rapidly. And to hire people on with a certain set of skills, that are going to be completely outdated within 5 years is a tricky proposition for an organization, right?
Not to mention the financial commitment too to transformation, right? Like you can't transform and save money. It's very, very challenging to do. On the other side of a transformation, you can, but to the investments that you have to make up front, it's going to be an investment to the organization.
Without a doubt. And I think that as you're training people up, they're going to look for opportunities at organizations that probably look a lot like us, right? That are going to continue to push the envelope of what's happening around these technologies. I love concepts around DevOps, and I love the stories of Netflix and how they built this platform, and everyone access to that platform securely can make changes, and they make hundreds of changes on a daily basis. And so it shows the power of the enablement of those platforms. That same type of approach is used in these platforms for innovation. And so the major hyperscale providers, they release major changes, over 1,000 changes a year. So to ask sort of someone that is in an IT role to keep up with that and then be able to digest on the best way that I can build a solution moving forward, taking into account serverless and functions and platform and infrastructure. So the limitless way that in containerization, microservices, that we can build modern applications, and there being a best way to do it based on an organization, that's another component where organizations need help to make sure that they're able to understand how these technologies are rapidly changing, and then how to best leverage the changes in those technologies to build solutions that are going to give them a competitive advantage. So I love the pace of change. I mean, being a technologist, and it just is going faster and faster. And so the things we're doing around, building platforms, the things we're doing around, sec DevOps, it's working really well based on how fast people are going to be able to roll out changes to their platforms, and we see and live it every day.
That sounds like something a solutions integrator would do.
There you go. Thanks, Chris. I appreciate that.
So one of the things that, like Sandesh alluded to this too, sort of why transform, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, there's the idea that, for a lot of organizations that, always historically had viewed technology and IT as sort of a cost center. Yeah. Now, these businesses have really transformed, if you will, into seeing technology as a real top-line contributor, right? Do you see more companies monetizing their tech these days?
I do, and what my favorite thing is when you see a company enter a new space and create disruption because of technology. And so, we work with companies that have this access to this data, and they're now monetizing that data in really unique ways. And sometimes that's becoming their business. And so, they start here, and some of the use cases are bizarre. They start here, they work through this concept of, we have this asset that exists within data. We're going to start to monetize that data in new ways. And they end up in a completely different field. And so you see those things, which are incredible. But there's also the other side of it, which is there's someone that was sitting in that space who just got disrupted in a big way. And so the typical pattern to the biggest parts of disruption that we see is technology forming a platform, that platform taking a client base, lifting it and moving it. And another time we see that is when companies lack the connection to the end state customer. And so they haven't built that relationship, whether it be through a device and an application and an experience, and someone comes in and creates that experience, they can just take that full customer base and lift it. In those scenarios, I didn't even have the relationship to defend myself. And next thing I know, there's a disruptive platform that comes in. So I think businesses have seen enough of that to where, there's uncertainty and doubt enough around it where they don't want to be disrupted. They want to create the disruption. And so you see that side of it. And you see the other side of it where someone has this idea and says, gosh, man, if I can just monetize the capabilities and data we have in a new way, it's going to create a new opportunity for us. And that's really kind of the innovation side of what we do. Some of my favorite projects are where we find a visionary within an organization. We work with them around an ideation session to take what their vision is and then enhance it. Turn that into a minimum viable product. So prove out the use case associated with that and then actually implement it. And when you see that fundamentally change their business, change the direction their business is going or create disruption, it's just the most incredible feeling. And a lot of times when we're doing that work, there's really no technology conversations until we get past sort of the use cases and prove it out. And then we say, oh, by the way, this is where we're going to put it. This is the platform innovation we're going to create to support this initiative and moving forward. So those are some of the most, I'll use the word transformational projects that we get to do is in those sort of scenarios.
Where does this all go next? Like what's next for Insight? What's next for Solutions? What's on the horizon?
Where we're really putting focus is we're going to continue to make acquisitions. We're going to continue to grow organically. We want to continue to put focuses in simplifying the concepts of those platforms for innovation. And so if we can work with clients of all sizes, enterprise organizations, we do a lot of consulting work and we do a lot of high-end consulting work within those organizations around modern app, around data estate, those types of things. They have large IT organizations. We do point solutions around managed, but a lot of what we're doing is helping them with their transformation, and they already have that sort of established platform, or we're helping them enhance that platform, which they're going to manage. But when we get into the mid-market space, I think there's a huge opportunity for us to be that managed service provider for those organizations. And so let's create those platforms of innovation that sit out the edge. Let's create the connectivity, security, automation, optimization of those platforms, from the edge to the data center to the cloud. And let's work to manage them for them. And then let's help them through the innovation component of it. And so it's going to be a continued focus on building out those platforms, leveraging the technology provisions that they've made in the past and reimagining those in sort of this modern world. We do a tremendous amount of work around hybrid work. And so enabling people to work very effectively from home and the collaboration tools associated with that. We really kind of position that as an as-a-service type experience. So we'll continue to make investments in that. But really it's to, continue to look at our differentiation and the fact that, we have these longstanding relationships. We understand the technology that's provisioned and bought in the past and procured in the past, and want to help them reimagine that, build those platforms for innovation, where applicable, manage those platforms, and then help drive the innovation side of it. So it's just acquisitions and organic growth in those spaces.
Yeah, and I'm glad you threw in the managed services piece there, because I'll tell you, the one thing I see a lot of is people asking for more and more managed services because it gets so complicated to try to handle all this themselves. And it's not just the mid-market companies, it's the big companies too are looking for managed services solutions.
Well, it allows them to do more, like what Stan was saying earlier. They can now spend more time on their business and not making sure that all their widgets are all working well,
It's really interesting. We see managed services in a couple different frames, right? We're starting to see a lot of as-a-service consumption. And so as things have changed from an economic model, you look at it, inflation, I think, is at 6.4%. We're seeing a dip, but it's still all-time highs. You look at what GDP forecast is dipping from 3%, I think, to 1.7%, all-time low in 40-year period. And so, we talked a little bit about, what we've seen happen over, compare and contrast 2000 versus now. We have the winners, and those are the business that we're doing all the complex transformation around. We have the folks that are a little bit more worried, and those words were really around reprovisioning those assets and the technology jet side of it. When you think about that in the frame of, really not only technology debt, but how they're engaging around managed services and how they're engaging in different consumption models. When things get tight, we see managed services pick up. We're seeing a lot of as a service as something that our clients are talking to us about to say, we want to have a consumption model in which we consume traditional infrastructure. And our partners are really getting in this space as well. And so how can we consume differently? How can we do this through a predictive way? How can we do this through consumption models? And then how can you manage it? And so one of the areas that we're putting focus on is building out these reference architectures that connect the point solutions that our clients have into an as a service model. We're actually managing it and then offering that up in a cloud-like experience, I'll say, where you can see the consumption and everything associated with it. And so managed services in this space, you're 100% right, Chris, is starting to see quite a bit of focus. And we see this as a pattern. And then as a service, for me, and what was traditional, sort of, I'm going to procure infrastructure, now moving to consumption, is something that is a rapidly growing trend for us as well.
It all sounds awesome. I think it's the world has certainly changed a lot, and I think as you mentioned, companies need to either get on top of it or they're going to get left behind. So thank you so much for coming on. And good luck with everything. We're rooting for you here.
I appreciate it.
And thanks so much for sharing your wisdom on all this, because it is a rapidly changing and confusing space, and people are really looking to try to figure it out. So thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. We want to be that partner that has those answers for them, and just appreciate the time. And this was great. Thanks so much, guys.
Thanks for watching. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. And if you could be so very, very kind as to click on that subscribe button, because that really helps the channel a ton. And while you're at it, you might as well click the like, because you're kind of already down there. And I will see you in the next one.